Alexander Harrington did not believe in second chances, not for failed deals, not for weak employees, and certainly not for his own frozen heart. But Elena Ramirez walked into his corner office like spring breaking through ice, carrying nothing but a leather portfolio and a smile that made him forget, just for a moment, why he had built walls so high. She was not supposed to matter. The contract position was temporary, with a maximum of 3 months, analyzing supply problems that had plagued his company for half a year. Alexander had watched 6 consultants fail before her, each one leaving with excuses and hefty invoices. Elena arrived Monday morning wearing a simple gray suit that had seen better days. Her natural curly hair was pulled back in a professional bun, reflecting her Hispanic heritage and the resilience forged from years in foster care. When his assistant introduced them, she did not gush, flatter, or try to impress him with credentials. "Mr. Harrington," she said, extending her hand with a firm grip. "I read through the files you sent. Your problem is not in the supply chain. It is in the communication gaps between your warehouse managers and the procurement team. They are ordering based on outdated data because nobody bothered to sync the systems. Give me access to your internal platforms in 3 weeks. I will have it solved." Alexander blinked, caught off guard by her directness. Most people trembled in his presence. Elena Ramirez looked at him like he was simply another puzzle to solve. She delivered in 2 weeks and 4 days. The solution was elegant, simple, and saved his company millions. Alexander called her into meetings she was not required to attend, asking her opinion on matters outside her contract scope. She answered with the same straightforward honesty, never trying to soften truths he needed to hear. When executives pushed back on her recommendations, Elena did not argue. She presented data, let the numbers speak, and watched grown men realize a contracted analyst had outsmarted them. "You are wasted on temporary work," Alexander told her one evening as they reviewed quarterly projections. The office had emptied hours ago, just the two, surrounded by paperwork and cold coffee. "I want to offer you a permanent position." Elena said that I cannot accept it, not looking up from her spreadsheet. "The salary would be substantial." "It is not about money, Mr. Harrington." "Then what is it about?" She finally met his eyes. "My abuela is sick, very sick. I'm working 3 contracts simultaneously because her medical bills are drowning me. A permanent position means giving up the other 2 incomes. I cannot afford that risk right now." Alexander felt something shift in his chest. Most people who worked for him guarded their struggles and maintained professional facades. Elena's honesty was disarming. What is her prognosis? They do not know yet. More tests, more waiting, more bills. Elena's voice remained steady, but Alexander saw the exhaustion beneath. "I do not tell you this for sympathy. I tell you because you deserve an honest answer about why I cannot accept. Even though working here has been my best professional experience, the best." Alexander found himself wanting to hear more. "You actually listen. Most employers hear what they want to hear. You listen to what is actually being said. That is rare." Alexander should have let it go, should have accepted her refusal and moved on to the next candidate. Instead, he heard himself say, "What if I doubled the salary, covered your abuela's medical expenses through the company insurance?" "Why would you do that?" "Because losing you would be more expensive than keeping you." Elena studied him with those dark, intelligent eyes, searching for the catch. "What is really happening here, Mr. Harrington? I do not know what you mean." "Yes, you do. Men like you do not hand out charity. There is always a reason." Alexander leaned back in his chair, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "You remind me that not everyone is trying to take something from me. That is rare in my world. You may have built a world that attracts the wrong people. Maybe I have." The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither acknowledged. Elena broke it first, returning to her spreadsheet. "I will think about your offer." She stayed. The weeks that followed blurred professional lines neither intended to cross. Late nights became their routine. Alexander would order dinner. Elena would argue that he wasted money on expensive takeout when pizza worked fine. They would eat surrounded by reports and projections, conversations drifting from profit margins to personal histories they had both buried deep. One evening, Elena fell asleep at her desk, exhausted from juggling multiple jobs and her abuela's care. Alexander found her there around midnight, head pillowed on her arms, breathing soft and even. He should have woken her, sent her home. Instead, he draped his jacket over her shoulders and continued working quietly so she could rest. She woke an hour later, disoriented, finding Alexander's jacket warm around her and him working across the room as if this were normal. "You should have woken me," she said, embarrassed. "You needed sleep more than I needed conversation." He did not look up from his laptop. "Your third contract, the one with the shipping company, you should drop it. They are underpaying you, and the work is redundant to what you are doing here." "I need the income. I will match what they are paying. Consider it a bonus for the supply chain project. You have earned it." Elena studied him, trying to understand this man who kept surprising her. "Why do you do that?" "Do what? Act like you do not care, then do something unexpectedly kind?" Alexander finally looked at her, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "I may be trying to remember how. My father died when I was young," Alexander admitted one night, staring at the city lights beyond his window. "His last words to me were that I would never amount to anything, that I was weak, just like my mother. I built all this to prove him wrong, but he is not alive to see it, so what is the point?" Elena set down her pen. "The point is, you survived him. That is the real victory. You sound like you know something about surviving." "Foster care," she said. "I lived in 17 different homes before I aged out. Some are good, most are indifferent, and a few are terrible. I learned early that nobody stays. Everyone leaves eventually, so you'd better learn to stand alone. That is a lonely philosophy. It is a survival strategy." "Maybe," Alexander said quietly. "We have both been surviving when we could have been living." Elena looked at him, then really looked, and Alexander saw his loneliness reflected. Two people had armored themselves against the world, sitting in an empty office, pretending their connection was purely professional. The breakthrough came on a Thursday night in early winter. They had been working on a critical project for months that would either revolutionize the company's distribution network or cost them millions in failed infrastructure. Elena had caught an error in the contractor's proposal that Alexander had missed. A single miscalculation that would have collapsed the entire system within months of implementation. Alexander said, "You just saved this company from a disaster," staring at her corrections in disbelief. "And doing my job." "No, Elena, this is extraordinary work. This is—" He stopped, shaking his head. "Do you have any idea how brilliant you are?" She laughed, but it sounded uncomfortable. "I know how to spot problems. You know how to see what others miss." "That is a gift, Mr. Harrington." "Alexander, please. We have earned first names by now." "Alexander," she tried, but the name felt foreign in her tongue. "Please do not make this into something it is not. What do you think this is? A good working relationship between employer and employee. Is that all you think this is?" Elena stood abruptly, gathering her papers. "It is late. I should go." But Alexander stood too, moving around his desk, closing the distance between them. "Elena, do not. Do not what? Please do not make me hope for something that will not happen. I have had enough disappointment for one lifetime." "Who said it would not happen? Your entire life says it. You are Alexander Harrington. You do not do relationships, connections, or anything that cannot be calculated on a spreadsheet. Everyone knows that. What if I am tired of being that person? Then you will wake up tomorrow and remember why you built these walls in the first place, and I will be the fool who believed you would climb over them." Alexander reached out, his fingers barely grazing her arm. "What if I am already climbing?" Elena's breath caught. They stood inches apart, the city glittering behind them. The office was silent except for their breathing. Every rational thought in Alexander's mind screamed to step back, maintain professional distance, and protect himself from the vulnerability threatening to crack his carefully constructed armor. Instead, he kissed her. Elena froze for half a heartbeat before kissing him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. It was not gentle or tentative. It was months of tension breaking like a dam. Two lonely people find warmth in each other after years of cold. They made it to the leather couch in his office. Clothes shed with fumbling urgency, whispered names replacing formal titles. Alexander traced the curve of her spine, memorized the sound of her breathing, and for the first time in his adult life, felt something besides the hollow satisfaction of winning. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling. "This changes everything," Elena whispered. "I know. What happens tomorrow?" "I do not know," Alexander admitted, his fingers tracing lazy circles on her shoulder. "But tonight, can we pretend tomorrow does not exist?" Elena pressed closer, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Tonight we can pretend anything." They fell asleep there, wrapped in each other and borrowed warmth, neither knowing that tomorrow would shatter everything they had found. That the life growing inside Elena would become the fault line that cracked them apart. Years later, Alexander remembered this night and understood it was the last time he had felt truly human before he chose to become the monster his father always said he was. The city lights continued their patterns outside. The office hummed with the quiet machinery of after-hours existence, and for a few borrowed hours, two people who had learned not to trust anyone let themselves trust each other completely. But in that vulnerable embrace, Alexander glimpsed a life beyond isolation. But dawn brought dread of entanglement. Elena stood in her bathroom at dawn, staring at the plastic test in trembling hands. The two pink lines blurred through her tears. She had known for weeks. Her body had been whispering truths she refused to hear. The exhaustion that coffee could not touch. The way certain smells made her stomach revolt. The tenderness that would not fade. But knowing and confirming were different animals. She sat on the edge of her bathtub, phone in hand, thumb hovering over Alexander's name. They had not spoken about that night. The next morning, he woke up early, dressed silently, and left her a note saying he had an early meeting. The note was polite, distant, and professional. Elena had understood the message. What happened was a mistake they would both pretend never occurred. She had kept that note, though she did not know why, folded it into her wallet behind her abuela's hospital card, a reminder of the moment everything shifted. Sometimes she would pull it out during sleepless nights, reading his neat handwriting, searching for warmth in the formal words. There was none, just efficiency, just distance. She respected that boundary, kept their interactions purely work-related, spoke only when necessary, and felt the walls rebuild between them brick by brick. If Alexander had noticed how she could not meet his eyes anymore, he would have never mentioned it. He approved without question, although he wondered why she suddenly requested to work from home 3 days a week. Now those walls would crumble whether she wanted them to or not. Elena spent 3 weeks rehearsing the conversation. She would wake at night, script perfect phrases, imagine his responses, and prepare rebuttals. In her kindest fantasy, he would be shocked but supportive. In her most realistic, he would offer money and distance. In her darkest nightmares, the one she tried not to acknowledge, he would accuse her of orchestrating it all. She practiced in mirrors, speaking to her reflection, and trying to keep her voice steady. She wrote scripts on paper, then burned them in her kitchen sink, watching the words turn to ash. Nothing felt right. Nothing captured the complexity of what she needed to say. "I am pregnant. I am terrified. I need you, but I will not beg." Her abuela called during those weeks, her voice weak from treatment. "You sound different, mija. What is wrong?" Elena could not tell her. Not yet. Not until she knew what Alexander would say, what path she would be walking. Her abuela had enough burdens without adding this uncertainty. She scheduled a meeting through his assistant. Personal matter she had written, hating how those 2 words contained a universe of fear. 15 minutes, his assistant replied. Between the board meeting and the investor calls. 15 minutes to tell a man he was going to be a father. 15 minutes to change both their lives. Elena dressed carefully that morning, choosing a simple navy dress that did not yet reveal the subtle changes to her body. She arrived at his office building with 10 minutes to spare. Spent them in the bathroom vomiting from nerves rather than morning sickness, then rode the elevator up trying to remember how to breathe. His assistant waved her through without small talk. Elena pushed open the heavy door to Alexander's corner office, that familiar space where they had once talked for hours, where they had crossed every professional line, where she had felt safe enough to imagine something more. Alexander sat behind his massive desk, tablet in hand, reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked older, harder, like a marble statue had replaced the man she had known. He did not look up when she entered. "Elena, what is this about? I have the investor call in 12 minutes. She stood before his desk, hands clasped to stop their shaking. "I need to tell you something important. Can it wait? I am reviewing critical data." "Alexander?" Her voice cracked. "Please look at me." He set down the tablet with visible irritation, removed his glasses, and finally met her eyes. "What is it?" Elena had rehearsed this moment for weeks. None of those practice speeches mattered now. The words came out raw and straightforward. "I am pregnant. The baby is yours." The silence that followed felt alive, growing teeth devouring the air between them. Alexander's face went through a remarkable transformation. Confusion, realization, and something cold and calculating made Elena's blood freeze. "I see." He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers like he was analyzing a bad investment. "And you are sure it is mine?" The question slapped her harder than a physical blow. "That night was my first time in over 2 years. Yes, Alexander, I am certain." Convenient timing. When your abuela's medical expenses peak, Elena feels something crack in her chest. "What are you suggesting?" "I am not suggesting anything. I am stating facts. You sleep with me once, get pregnant, and now you need financial support. Some might call that strategic. Some might call it biology," Elena said, her voice shaking with rage and hurt. "We did not use protection. Neither of us was thinking clearly." "Oh, I think you were feeling very clearly." Alexander stood, his height suddenly intimidating rather than comforting. "You saw an opportunity. A wealthy man, a moment of weakness, a lifetime meal ticket. How dare you?" Elena stepped closer to his desk, tears streaming down her face. "I came here because I thought you deserved to know. Because, despite everything, I believed the man I met, the one who told me about his father, who listened when I talked about foster care. That man would want to know he was going to be a parent." "That man was an illusion," Alexander said coldly. "A momentary lapse in judgment. I do not do relationships, Elena. I certainly do not do families, and I will not be trapped in one by someone smart enough to know precisely how to manipulate me. I am not manipulating you. I am pregnant. This is real. Then handle it." He turned toward his window, dismissing her with his posture. "You are an intelligent woman. You know your options. Choose whatever you want. But do not expect me to play father to a child I never wanted." Elena stood rooted, unable to comprehend what she was hearing. "You never wanted. Alexander, this is not about wanting. This is about reality. I am having your baby. Number." He turned back, his face carved from ice. "You are having a baby. What you do with it is entirely your choice. But leave me out of your decision. I want no part of this fantasy you have constructed where I am the supportive partner, where we play house, where I become someone I am fundamentally not. I never asked you to be perfect," Elena whispered, her voice breaking. "I just ask you to be present. I am not built for this, Elena. My father was right about one thing. I am better at building empires than creating anything that requires a heart." He glanced at his watch. "You have your answer now. Please leave. I have a call in 4 minutes." Elena stared at him, at this stranger wearing Alexander's face, speaking with Alexander's voice, but utterly unrecognizable. She thought about arguing, pleading, making him see reason, but the set of his jaw, the cold distance in his eyes, the way he had already mentally dismissed her, it all told her the truth she did not want to accept. She was alone. She said quietly that you will regret this, not as a threat, but as a certainty. "I doubt that. Not today, maybe not even this year. But someday you will realize what you threw away. And you will understand that the real tragedy is not that you lost me, it is that you never even tried to find yourself." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Goodbye, Elena." She walked to the door on legs that felt like water, her hand on the handle when his voice stopped her. "For what it is worth," he said, still facing away, "I did like the person I was when I was with you. But that person was weak, and I cannot afford weakness. That person was human, Elena replied, and you will spend the rest of your life trying to remember what that felt like. She left his office, took the elevator down, walked through the lobby where she had entered so many mornings with hope and purpose, pushed through the glass doors into sunlight that felt cruel in its cheerfulness. The street bustled with people going about their days, unaware that Elena Ramirez's world had just imploded. A street vendor was selling flowers on the corner, bright, cheerful bouquets that mocked her devastation. A couple walked past hand in hand, laughing at something private between them. The world continued as if nothing had changed, as if her life had not just shattered into pieces she did not know how to reassemble. She made it 3 blocks before collapsing against a building, sobbing so hard she could not breathe. One hand pressed to her stomach where a life grew that its father had just denied. Vowing silently to the tiny cluster of cells that they would survive this together, she would be enough even if he had proven he was nothing. But in that moment of utter despair, Elena felt a spark of defiance ignite. She would not let this break her completely. Drawing on the resilience honed from her foster care years and cultural heritage of strong Latino women, she wiped her tears and stood tall. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges amplified by societal biases against single mothers from minority backgrounds, but she would face it head-on, for herself, her abuela, and the child who deserved a mother who refused to yield. Elena's phone buzzed the next morning, a message from Alexander's assistant. Effective immediately, her contract was terminated. No explanation, no severance, just a clinical notification that her building access was revoked, and her final payment would be processed. She had expected it. Somehow, that made it worse. For 3 days, Elena barely moved from her couch. She called in sick to her other contracts, could not force herself to eat, and spent hours staring at nothing, while her mind replayed every word Alexander had spoken. The cruelty of it hollowed her out. Not just the rejection, but the accusations, the suggestion that she had planned this, engineered intimacy for profit. Her phone buzzed with messages about rent from her abuela, colleagues, and landlord. Elena ignored them all. She existed in a fog of shock and grief, mourning not just the relationship that never was, but the future she had briefly let herself imagine. On the second night, she dreamed of her childhood, rotating through foster homes, learning that love was always conditional, always temporary. She woke understanding that Alexander's rejection was not a surprise. It was a pattern. People always leave. She had known this truth her entire life, had briefly forgotten it, and now remembered with brutal clarity that hurt worse than abandonment. He had reduced their connection to a transaction, made their night together cheap and calculated, turned her honesty into manipulation. On the 4th day, Elena forced herself to stand. She showered, dressed, made tea she could not drink, and opened her laptop. If Alexander thought destroying her career would make her disappear, he had miscalculated. Elena Ramirez had survived foster care, poverty, systemic barriers designed to break people like her. She would survive him too. She spent the day applying for positions, contacting old contacts, and rebuilding what he had torn down. The responses were slower than usual. Word traveled fast in their industry. Nobody said it explicitly, but Elena understood. Associating with someone Alexander Harrington wanted gone was career suicide. Fine. She would build something he could not touch. The ultrasound appointment came on a gray Tuesday. Elena went alone, lying on the examination table while a technician spread cold gel across her barely showing stomach. The screen flickered to life, grainy images that meant nothing to Elena's untrained eye. Then she heard the heartbeat, fast and strong, impossibly absolute. "Oh," the technician said, her voice brightening with surprise. "Well, this is wonderful." "What is?" "There are 2 more. You are having triplets." The room tilted. Elena gripped the edge of the table, certain she had misheard. "Triplets. Are you sure?" "Very sure. See here, here, and 3 distinct heartbeats, 3 babies." "Congratulations." The technician kept talking, showing her each baby, measuring, and pointing out tiny developing features. Elena heard none of it. Her mind had shut down, unable to process this multiplication of impossibility. "Are they healthy?" Elena finally managed to ask. "From what I can see, everything looks perfect. You will need to see a specialist for a high-risk pregnancy, but right now all three are developing beautifully." 3. Not one impossible situation, but three. 3 babies to feed, clothe, and shelter. 3 lives are depending entirely on her. She drove home in a daze, parked in front of her apartment, and sat in her car for an hour. Then she screamed until her throat burned raw, until her voice cracked and gave out, until the fear and rage and terror had somewhere to go besides eating her alive from the inside. When the screaming stopped, she sat silently, hands on her stomach. "Okay," she whispered to the 3 lives growing inside her. "Okay, we can do this. I do not know how yet, but we will figure it out. I promise you, I promise I will figure it out." The eviction notice came the following week. Her landlord was polite but firm. The building policy did not allow single mothers with multiple infants. Too much noise, too much liability. She had 30 days. Elena spent those 30 days methodically losing everything. Her savings drained paying for medical appointments, and her basic insurance barely covered them. Her remaining contracts ended when she could not hide her pregnancy symptoms anymore and could not maintain the energy required. She applied for assistance, filled out forms until her hand cramped, and qualified for programs with waiting lists measured in months. On day 28, she packed everything she owned into her car and drove to the women's shelter across town. The building was institutional, beige walls and fluorescent lights, and the defeated expressions of women who had also lost everything. Elena checked in, received her assigned cot in a room shared with 11 other women, and lay down fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. She had hit bottom. This was it. This was what Alexander's rejection had led to. A pregnant woman sleeping in a shelter, her entire world fitting into 2 suitcases and a backpack. Elena waited for the despair to consume her. Instead, she felt something else rising. Not hope, she was not naive enough for that, but determination. Stubborn, furious determination. She had survived worse than this. She would survive worse than him. The next morning, Elena bought a cheap notebook and began planning. She would create her own path if traditional employment were closed to her. She started a blog using the shelter's public computer that night, titling it Triple Horizons. Her first post was raw. "I am a single woman expecting triplets. Their father told me to handle it alone, so I am. This is me handling it." She posted about searching for bulk diapers at thrift stores, about free prenatal classes at the community clinic, where nurses looked at her with pity she pretended not to see, about applying for subsidized housing while knowing the waiting list was longer than her pregnancy, about crying in shelter bathrooms, then washing her face and pretending she was fine. She filmed herself building second-hand cribs from Craigslist, assembling them in the shelter's common area, while other women offered advice and encouragement. She shared the brutal honesty of her situation. Terrified, broke, and alone, but refusing to quit. The blog started small, with 10 followers, 50, and hundreds as her posts were shared. People connected with her refusal to play victim, her dark humor about her situation, and her determination to survive what should have destroyed her. Someone asked if I was angry at the father, and she wrote one night, "Of course I am angry. I am furious, but anger is expensive. It takes the energy I need to build cribs and figure out how to afford formula for 3 infants. So I am putting the anger aside, not forgiving, just focusing on what matters. These 3 lives depend on me." The comments flooded in. Women sharing their own stories. Single mothers offering advice. Strangers are sending gift cards and baby items to the shelter's address. Elena did not want charity, but she was not proud enough to refuse help that would keep her daughters fed. Daughters. The ultrasound had confirmed it. 3 girls. Elena spent hours researching names lying on her shelter cot, one hand on her growing belly. She chose Sophia, Mia, and Isabella carefully. Strong names meant they were warriors before they were even born. She said each name aloud in the darkness, testing how they sounded together. Sophia, Mia and Isabella Ramirez, her daughters, her three miracles. She wondered what they would look like, what personalities they would develop, whether they would be best friends or rivals, or some complicated mixture of both. Sometimes, other women in the shelter would gather around, offering their baby name suggestions and debating meanings and origins. It was the first time since Alexander's rejection that Elena felt truly supported, surrounded by women who understood the struggle and celebrated her pregnancy instead of pitying it. "Strong names for strong girls," Maria said approvingly, an older woman who had lived at the shelter for months. "They will need strength, but they will have it. Look at their mother." "Your father chose not to know you," Elena whispered to her stomach one night. "That is his loss, his profound, terrible loss. You three will be loved so completely that his absence will not leave holes. I will fill every space with enough love for two parents." Elena told herself it did not matter what Alexander knew or did not know. This was not about him anymore. But late at night, when her daughters kicked against her ribs and the shelter lights dimmed and sleep would not come, she imagined him discovering the truth someday. Imagined him realizing exactly what he had abandoned. The fantasy brought no satisfaction, only exhaustion. Revenge required energy she needed elsewhere. So Elena Ramirez let Alexander Harrington fade into the past. Just another person who had left when things got difficult. Another name on the long list of people who taught her that survival meant relying only on herself. She would survive this, too. Not for him, not to prove anything to him, but because three little girls deserved a mother who refused to break, no matter how many times the world tried to shatter her. Pregnancy was war. Elena's body rebelled daily. Mornings spent hunched over shelter toilets, nausea relentless. Exhaustion sank into her bones, carrying three babies, amplifying every ache. Her back screamed by afternoon, the anxiety keeping her awake, counting problems she could not solve yet. But it also meant 3 times the motivation. She found a rhythm in the shelter. She wakes early before others stir, uses the computer lab to work on her blog, Triple Horizons, attends prenatal appointments on clinic days, and spends evenings in the standard room researching childcare options she cannot afford. The other women became her temporary family, sharing advice from their own experiences, watching her belly expand with awe and concern. "You are so small," Maria said one evening, an older woman who had been at the shelter for months. "How are you carrying 3 babies?" "Stubbornness," Elena replied, making Maria laugh. "You will need more than that, Mija. You will need help. I will manage." Nobody manages 3 babies alone. Not really, Elena wanted to argue, to prove she could handle anything, but her body betrayed her. She was already overwhelmed, and they had not even been born yet. How would she feed 3 infants simultaneously, change 3 diapers, soothe 3 sets of cries on 3 hours of sleep? The fear was suffocating when she felt it, so she did not. She focused on immediate problems instead, finding affordable formula sources, researching WIC programs, learning about triple strollers and how to apply for childcare subsidies. Each small victory, each problem solved, built her confidence brick by brick. Her blog readership grew steadily. 5,000 followers became 10,000. Elena posted videos of herself in the shelter, talking candidly about the reality of her situation, showing the cramped quarters, shared bathrooms, and institutional food. She was not trying to gain sympathy. She was documenting survival. "People keep asking why I am sharing this publicly," she said in one video. Her belly is enormous now, and her face is exhausted. Because silence protects people who should be held accountable. Because other women in my situation need to know they are not alone. Because my daughters will someday see these videos and know that their mother fought for them from the beginning. The comments shifted from sympathy to admiration. Brands started reaching out. Small companies wanted to send products in exchange for mentions. Elena accepted only what she needed: diapers, formula, and baby clothes. Everything else felt like charity she had not earned. One evening, a woman named Patricia found Elena in the computer lab. "You are the blogger," Patricia said. "The one with triplets is coming." "That is me. My daughter watches your videos. She is pregnant too, struggling. Seeing you survive gives her hope." Patricia paused, emotion thick in her voice. "Thank you for being honest about how hard this is." Elena felt tears sting her eyes. "I am not trying to inspire anyone. I am just trying to make it to tomorrow." That is precisely why you inspire people. You are not pretending it is easy. You are showing them it is possible. After Patricia left, Elena sat staring at her blog dashboard. 20,000 followers now. 20,000 people are watching her life unfold. The weight of that felt enormous, but it also felt like purpose. She started posting more deliberately, thinking about what those 20,000 people needed to hear, how to find resources, navigate systems designed to make you quit, and hold your head up when society said you should be ashamed. "I am not ashamed," she told the camera one night. "I am exhausted. I am terrified. I am overwhelmed. But I am not ashamed of my daughter's situation or my fight for a life that looks different from what I planned. Shame is what people use to control you. I am done being controlled." The video went viral, 50,000 views in 2 days, 100,000 by week's end. Suddenly, Elena Ramirez was not just a blogger. She was a voice for women who were told they should suffer in silence, particularly Latina women facing systemic biases in housing and employment. Local news reached out. Elena declined. National parenting magazines wanted interviews. She refused. This was not about fame. This was about survival. Then, the pain started early, too early, like knives in her abdomen. Elena woke at dawn, gasping, clutching her stomach. Maria heard her and called for help. An ambulance came, sirens screaming, shelter residents gathering in worried clusters as paramedics loaded Elena onto a stretcher. "My babies," she kept saying, "it is too soon. They cannot come yet." "We are going to take care of you," a paramedic promised. The hospital was in chaos. Doctors, machines, and urgent voices discussed terms Elena did not understand. They stabilized her, stopped the early labor, and put her on bed rest protocols. She stayed in the hospital for 5 days, monitored constantly, medication flowing through IVs, nurses checking on her hourly. A young nurse named Simone took special interest in Elena's case. During quiet night shifts, she would sit beside Elena's bed and talk. "My sister had twins," Simone shared one evening. "Single mom too. It was brutal at first, but she made it through. You will too." How did she do it? She let people help. The hardest part for her was accepting that she could not do everything alone. She had to build a village, even when pride said she should handle it herself. Elena thought about that constantly. Her entire life had taught her self-reliance. Depending on others meant giving them power to disappoint you. But maybe for her daughters, she needed to learn a different way. She posted from her hospital bed, her phone propped on the tray table, and explained what had happened. "The doctor says the babies are okay for now," she told the camera, her voice shaking. "But carrying 3 means higher risks. I am on strict bed rest until they are born, which means I cannot work, cannot even walk around much. I do not know how to manage this, but we will figure it out. We always do." The comments exploded with support. People sent money. She tried to refuse, but she desperately needed it. Others shared their own bed rest stories, offering advice and encouragement. One comment particularly struck her. "You keep saying I when you should be saying we. You have thousands of us with you. Let us help." Elena read that comment 17 times before crying herself to sleep. The shelter took her back on modified terms. They moved her to a quieter room, let her stay in bed most days, and brought meals to her. It was not ideal, but it was better than being homeless during bed rest. Elena spent those weeks planning obsessively. She created spreadsheets of expenses, mapped out schedules for 3 babies, and researched every available resource. She contacted local organizations about subsidized housing, childcare assistance, formula programs, and navigating bureaucratic systems that often marginalized women of color like her. Each application filled out, each phone call made, was a small act of defiance against Alexander's expectation that she would fail. Her blog transformed during bed rest. She could not film herself doing much, so she wrote instead. Long, raw posts about fear and determination, about what it meant to choose life, even when life chose hardship, about refusing to let one man's rejection define her daughter's futures. "Their father said I am alone," she wrote. "He is wrong. I have 20,000 people following this journey. I have shelter workers checking on me daily. I have women in this building who share their food and advice. I have strangers sending baby clothes and words of encouragement. That is not alone. That is community." One sleepless night, Elena opened a new document and started a business plan. She had been surviving on blogging and donations, but that was not sustainable long-term. She needed something stable, something she controlled, something that used her actual skills. By dawn, she had the outline, an online consulting service for small businesses, helping them optimize operations and supply chains, something she could do from home with 3 infants. She named it Resilient Chains Consulting. If she was going to survive having 3 babies alone, she might as well make it her brand. The plan was ambitious, maybe impossible, but Elena had stopped believing in impossible. Impossible was carrying triplets while homeless. Impossible was building a following from a shelter cot. Impossible was surviving daily when someone you trusted had told you to handle it alone. She had already done the impossible. Building a business was just the next step. Maria visited during those bed rest weeks, bringing small gifts, a hand-knit blanket, second-hand baby books, and homemade soup. "You remind me of my daughter," Maria said one afternoon, sitting beside Elena's bed. "She was stubborn like you, refused to accept defeat." "Was?" Elena asked gently. "She died giving birth. The baby survived, but she did not make it." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Her son is grown now, successful. Sometimes I wonder if she would be proud of the man he became. I am sure she would be. You are going to make it through this, mija. You and your 3 girls. I feel it in my bones, and they will grow up knowing their mother was a warrior." After Maria left, Elena touched her belly, feeling 3 distinct movements. 3 separate little beings, each developing their own personalities already. "We are going to make it," she whispered, "all 4 of us. And someday, when you are old enough to understand, I will tell you this whole story, the complex and beautiful parts. And you will know that you were wanted, so desperately wanted. And your mother never gave up, even when giving up would have been easier." Labor struck on a Thursday afternoon, early but not dangerously so. Elena was alone in her shelter room when the first real contraction hit, different from false alarms, unmistakable in intensity. She grabbed her packed bag, called for Maria, and strolled to the lobby where an ambulance awaited. Maria held her hand during the ride, murmuring prayers in Spanish, squeezing back when Elena's contractions peaked. "You are going to be okay, mija. Your babies are coming. They are ready to meet their mama." The hospital room was sterile and white, with machines beeping and nurses moving efficiently. Elena's doctor came quickly, checking her progress, explaining what would happen next. "Triplets usually mean cesarean section," Dr. Palmer said gently. "It is safer for them and for you." Elena nodded, too overwhelmed to argue. Fear clutched her throat. She had read about C-sections, watched videos, and prepared as much as one could prepare. But preparation and reality were different creatures. The surgical suite, the anesthesia, and the vulnerability of being cut open while conscious. It all terrified her in ways she could not voice. A nurse noticed her panic. "Hey, look at me. You are going to be amazing. In less than an hour, you will meet your babies. Focus on that." "I am alone," Elena whispered. "No, you are not. We are all here with you. Every person in that operating room is here to make sure you and your babies are safe. You are not alone." They wheeled her to surgery, bright lights overhead, strangers surrounding her, numbing her lower body while she stayed conscious and terrified. "I am here," a nurse said, holding her hand. "You are doing great." Then she heard it, the first cry, thin and reedy and absolutely perfect. "Baby A," someone announced. "It is a girl." Elena started crying. Then the second cry, stronger. Baby B, another girl. One more, the nurse said, squeezing Elena's hand. One more, Mama. The third cry came softer, delayed just enough to spike Elena's fear before the sound filled the room. Baby C, girl number 3. They are all here. They brought them to her one by one. Tiny bodies wrapped in hospital blankets. Sophia, Mia, and Isabella, her daughters, her 3 miracles. Elena looked at their perfect faces, their little fingers curling instinctively around hers, and felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. Alexander Harrington had no idea these 3 existed. I did not know he had rejected not 1 child, but 3. Did not know he had left her to deliver triplets alone, to recover from surgery in a hospital room without a partner to hold her hand or share the overwhelming joy and terror. "Can I take a picture?" Elena asked the nurse. "Of course, Mama." Elena took dozens of photos with her phone, images of 3 swaddled babies lying side by side, their faces peaceful in sleep. She posted one to her blog with a simple caption, "Sophia, Mia, and Isabella Ramirez. Born today? Perfect. We did it." The post exploded, hundreds of thousands of views within hours. Comments poured in from followers who had watched her entire journey, celebrating with her, crying with her, sharing in the victory of survival. Elena spent 4 days in the hospital learning how to nurse 3 babies, how to change diapers with surgical incisions healing, and how to function on minutes of sleep. The nurses were patient, teaching her strategies for multiples and helping her develop systems. One nurse, Grace, an older woman, spent extra time with Elena during night shifts when the hospital quieted and exhaustion felt overwhelming. "My first night alone with my twins, I cried for 4 hours straight," Grace shared while showing Elena how to position 2 babies for tandem feeding. "Thought I had made a terrible mistake, thought I could not do it." "What changed?" Elena asked. "Nothing changed. I just kept going. 1 diaper, 1 feeding, 1 moment at a time. Eventually, those moments added to days, weeks, and years. Now my twins are grown with their own children. It passes faster than you think." Elena tried to imagine that future. Sophia, Mia, and Isabella grown, maybe with their own families. The image felt impossible and comforting simultaneously. "You are a natural," Dr. Palmer said during discharge rounds, "but do not be afraid to ask for help." "I do not have anyone to ask," Elena replied honestly. Then, reach out to support groups and other mothers of multiples. Nobody does this alone. But Elena was doing it alone. The shelter had agreed to take her back, with 3 infants, but only temporarily while she found permanent housing. She had 6 weeks before they would need the space for other women. 6 weeks to find an apartment, secure childcare, launch her consulting business, and somehow not collapse from exhaustion. She posted about the reality of those first weeks. The videos showed her at 3 in the morning, feeding 2 babies while the third cried, her hair unwashed, eyes hollow with fatigue. She talked about the physical pain of recovery, the mental strain of constant infant needs, and the moment she sobbed in the bathroom because she could not hold all 3 crying babies simultaneously. "I will not lie and say this is beautiful," she told the camera during one particularly rough night. "This is survival. This is brutal. These 3 humans depend entirely on me, while my body is still healing and my brain is running on fumes. But we are doing it. Every day we are still here is a victory." Her honesty resonated. The blog hit 1 million followers. Companies reached out with sponsorship offers. News outlets wanted her story. Elena accepted only what helped: formula companies, diaper brands, and baby product sponsors that paid enough for her to afford a small apartment. Meanwhile, across town, in a world Elena had stopped thinking about, Alexander Harrington's empire was beginning to crack. It started small, an anonymous email to a journalist containing details about a pregnant employee who had been fired abruptly. The journalist, Doug, found Elena's blog through search algorithms and connected the timeline. The article was published on a slow news day. Billionaire Alexander Harrington abandoned a pregnant employee after an intimate relationship. The headline was clickbait, but the story beneath it was thorough. The journalist pulled employment records through sources, matched dates, and found Elena's blog posts, which never named Alexander, but clearly referenced a powerful employer. The article did not make explicit claims. It just presented facts and let readers conclude. Those conclusions came fast and furious. Alexander's social media exploded. Thousands of comments linked to Elena's blog, to videos of her struggling with 3 newborns, to posts documenting her homelessness and survival. People compared timelines, noted how she had been fired immediately after that mysterious personal matter meeting, and watched her deliver triplets alone while Alexander attended galas and investment summits. The narrative crystallized overnight. Wealthy CEO impregnates employee, fires her, abandons her to poverty while living in luxury. And the internet was not kind. Alexander's company stock dropped 3 points in one day as sponsors pulled out of his upcoming charity event. Board members called emergency meetings. Protesters gathered outside his building with signs reading, "Deadbeat Billionaire" and "Support Your Children." His crisis management team worked overtime drafting statements, managing media, and trying to contain damage. They released something carefully worded. Mr. Harrington disputes these characterizations and maintains that any personal matters are private. It made things worse. The statement sounded cold, corporate, precisely like what a man who had abandoned a pregnant woman would say. Elena watched it all unfold from her small apartment, feeding babies and scrolling through headlines, feeling nothing but satisfaction. If anything, she felt hollow. This was not justice. This was a spectacle. Alexander was not facing consequences. He was facing bad publicity, which his money would eventually erase. But then the video went viral. Elena had posted it weeks before, singing to 3 sleepy toddlers before nap time. Her voice was terrible, and the song was nonsense about butterflies and dreams. But Sophia, Mia, and Isabella watched her with absolute devotion. Tiny faces turned toward their mother, like she was their entire world. The comments on that video ranged from supportive to angry. Thousands of people tagged Alexander's corporate accounts, demanding he see what he had abandoned. Others shared it with news outlets, celebrities, and influencers. The video symbolized single motherhood, resilience against abandonment, and love persisting despite rejection. A prominent activist shared it with a caption, "This is what strength looks like. Remember her face when you see his." The video had 3 million views. When Alexander's assistant sent him the link, he watched it alone in his penthouse, whiskey in hand, watching Elena's face full of exhausted love, watching 3 little girls who looked unmistakably like his mother, his sister, and himself. He watched their hands reaching for Elena, heard their babbling attempts at words, saw the devotion in their eyes, and Alexander Harrington, who had built an empire by never letting emotion dictate business, who had trained himself to feel nothing that could not be quantified, who had rejected a pregnant woman because vulnerability felt like weakness, finally understood what he had done. Alexander played the video 17 times before forcing himself to close it. Each replay carved deeper into something he had convinced himself no longer existed: conscience. Sophia had his mother's nose, delicate and slightly upturned. Mia had his eye shape, unmistakable in its almond curve. Isabella had the dimple his father used to have before bitterness consumed him. These were not just 3 random children. These were his daughters, his blood, his legacy. And he had told their mother to handle it alone, not knowing she was carrying triplets, leaving her homeless, penniless, struggling through pregnancy and delivery and newborn care without a shred of support. At the same time, he attended board meetings and celebrated profit margins. His penthouse suddenly felt suffocating, 70 floors above the city he had conquered. Surrounded by art worth millions and furniture that cost more than most people earned yearly, Alexander stood at his window and vomited into his $8,000 sink. He had abandoned 3 children, told their mother to handle it alone when she was carrying triplets, and left her to face the world while he lived in luxury. His phone buzzed constantly, board members demanding crisis control, investors threatening to pull funding, his mother calling from her retirement home, her voice brittle with disappointment. Alexander ignored them, watching that video again, studying his daughter's face, trying to comprehend the magnitude of his cruelty. The media storm intensified daily. Every business decision he made was scrutinized through this new lens. Protesters camped outside his building. Think pieces proliferated about wealthy men abandoning responsibility. His face became a meme, a symbol of callous privilege. One evening, Alexander stood in his living room and looked around at everything he had built. The imported furniture, the original artwork, the floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing a view of the city that cost more per month than Elena's entire apartment probably did. It suddenly looked hollow, meaningless, empty monuments to a life spent accumulating things instead of connections. He walked to his study and pulled out an old photo album he had kept buried in a drawer. His mother, young and smiling, is holding him as a toddler. His father, in the background, was already wearing the expression of disappointed cruelty that would define Alexander's childhood. He had spent his entire life trying not to become his father, and in the process, he had become exactly that. Someone who abandoned his family when they needed him most. Alexander hired a crisis management firm. They came with PowerPoint presentations and damage control strategies. "You need to make a statement," the lead consultant said. "Show remorse, acknowledge the situation." "I do not want to make a statement," Alexander replied. "I want to fix this." "Mr. Harrington, with respect, you cannot fix this. You can only minimize further damage. I have 3 daughters I did not know existed. That is not damage, that is reality." The consultant exchanged glances with her team. "According to public records and blog posts, you were informed of the pregnancy. You chose not to be involved. That is not the same as not knowing. I did not know about the triplets. Does that meaningfully change your culpability?" Alexander had no answer. The consultant was right. He had rejected Elena and their unborn child. Whether that child turned out to be 1 baby or 3 did not absolve him of the cruelty of that rejection. His attorneys advised him to stay away from Elena and the children, warning that any contact could be seen as admission of paternity and open him to legal claims. Alexander fired those attorneys. He did not need protection from responsibility. He needed to understand how to carry it. He started following Elena's blog obsessively, reading every post from the beginning, watching every video. He saw her journey from his office to homelessness to single motherhood, saw her build a business from nothing, create a community from isolation, and survive what should have destroyed her. She never mentioned his name or sought public sympathy by revealing his identity. When followers asked about the father, she said, "He's not in the picture." That is his choice. That restraint shamed him more than the protests ever could. Alexander hired a private investigator, not to find dirt, but to understand where Elena lived, how she supported herself, and whether the children had what they needed. The investigator returned with a thorough report: modest apartment, growing consulting business, adequate resources, but nothing comfortable. She was surviving, not thriving. The investigator included an address. Alexander drove to her neighborhood one Saturday morning, staying in his car, watching from a distance. Elena emerged from a small duplex, pushing a triple stroller. 3 children were strapped in, wearing mismatched clothes, one crying while the other babbled. She looked exhausted, her hair pulled back messily, and she wore yoga pants and an old sweatshirt. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Not because of physical appearance, though she was stunning despite exhaustion. Attractive because of what she represented: survival, strength, unconditional love, given freely to children whose father had offered nothing but rejection. Alexander watched her push the stroller to a small park. "I saw her lift the girls onto swings, making all 3 in rotation, kissing scraped knees when Mia fell, wiping ice cream from Isabella's face, and holding Sophia when she got upset about sharing toys. She was a mother and father, filling every role alone because he had forced her to. He sat in his luxury car, wearing $1,000 clothes, and understood that Elena possessed wealth he could never purchase. Purpose, love, connection to 3 tiny humans who depended on her. She was doing it, everything he had said she could not do. Everything he had implied was a trap or manipulation or calculated play for his money. She was raising their daughters alone, building a life despite his cruelty, thriving without him. The realization gutted him. As Alexander watched, an older woman approached Elena at the park. They talked for a few minutes, the woman gesturing to the triplets with admiration. Elena smiled, that genuine smile Alexander remembered from their nights working together. The woman said something that made Elena laugh, a real laugh that came from joy rather than obligation. Elena had rebuilt a life, found community, and created happiness from ashes, but Alexander had no part. He waited until she had packed the children back into the stroller and started walking home. Then he got out of his car, heart hammering, and walked toward her. Elena noticed him when he was 20 feet away. She stopped abruptly, her entire body going rigid. For a moment, neither moved, just stared at each other across the suburban sidewalk. Then Elena turned the stroller around and walked away. "Elena, please," Alexander called, following her. "I want to talk." "No, please, just 5 minutes," she spun back, her face carved from stone. "I said no, please stay away from my children." "Our children," Alexander said quietly. The words hung between them. Elena's hands tightened on the stroller handles. "You made it very clear they were not yours. You told me to handle it alone, so I am doing that. Now leave us alone." "I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Let me help." Elena laughed, sharp and bitter. "You want to help now? Where were you when I was homeless, when I was in labor, when I spent the first month after surgery unable to lift all 3 babies because I was recovering alone? You do not get to show up now that the hard part is over and pretend you care." "The hard part is not over," Alexander said. "Raising children is—" "Do not you dare lecture me about raising children. I have been doing it without you successfully. We do not need your guilt money, sudden interest, or whatever crisis of conscience brought you here." "I want to know them," Alexander said, his voice cracking. "I want to be their father." "You are not their father. You are the man who denied their existence." Elena leaned close, her voice dropping to something dangerous. "You accused me of trapping you, of manufacturing this to steal your money. You called our night together a mistake. You told me to handle the baby alone when I was carrying 3. You fired me. You abandoned us completely. Now you see videos going viral, and suddenly you care. It is not about the videos. I saw them and realized you were wrong, that your daughters exist, that I was not lying or manipulating you." Elena shook her head. "You are so many years too late. They do not know you, they do not need you, and I sure as hell do not want you anywhere near us." She turned the stroller again. This time, Alexander did not follow. He stood on the sidewalk, watching her disappear around the corner, watching his daughters' heads bobbing in the stroller, watching his chance at redemption walk away. Alexander could not stop thinking about them. 3 little girls in mismatched clothes, their faces mirror images of family members he had lost, growing up blocks away from his penthouse, yet universes apart. He tried again, showing up at Elena's apartment on a Tuesday morning, arms loaded with toys from an upscale boutique, designer dolls, educational games, plush animals that cost more than a week of groceries. He had spent hours selecting items, imagining tiny hands reaching for them, imagining being welcomed instead of rejected. Elena answered the door, holding Sophia on her hip. Mia and Isabella playing behind her in the living room, visible through the doorway. She looked at Alexander and the pile of gifts, and something like exhaustion crossed her face. "Money was all you had to give then," she said quietly. "I do not need it now. What I needed was a partner. What my daughters needed was a father who wanted them. You cannot purchase that retroactively." "I know I cannot buy forgiveness," Alexander said, his voice heavy. "Then why are you here with expensive toys? What do you think this accomplishes?" Alexander stood there, arms full of gifts, realizing she was right. He looked foolish and desperate, precisely like a man who believed problems could be solved with credit cards and grand gestures. "I do not know what else to do," he admitted. "Try actually changing," Elena said. "Try becoming someone who deserves to know them, not by buying things and being better." She closed the door gently. The gifts sat on her porch until rain ruined them. Alexander stood outside her building for 20 minutes, staring at the closed door before returning to his car. A neighbor watched him from across the street, clearly recognizing him from news coverage. her expression a mixture of curiosity and judgment. He tried email next, sending professional, measured messages about co-parenting arrangements and support. He outlined financial proposals, suggested schedules, and tried to sound reasonable rather than emotional. Elena responded with one line. "My children do not need a stranger who once denied their existence. They need stability, not your guilt." Each rejection felt like another layer of his armor being stripped away. Alexander had spent his adult life protecting himself from vulnerability, from pain, from the risk of becoming his father. Now he was drowning in all of it. He tried sending flowers, vibrant arrangements reflecting Elena's Latina heritage, hoping they might soften her resolve. Elena donated them to a nursing home. He tried leaving voice messages, pouring out apologies and promises. Elena blocked his number. Every attempt was met with silence or rejection, and Alexander understood why. He had earned this. Every closed door, every unanswered message, every moment of being shut out was precisely what he deserved. One evening, Alexander found himself at a bookstore, standing in the parenting section, reading titles about fatherhood and child development. A woman beside him noticed and smiled sympathetically. "First time, Dad?" she asked. "Something like that. My advice. Just be present. Kids do not need perfect parents. They need parents who show up." The words echoed in his mind for days. Show up. Be present. Everything he had not been. He began therapy, something he had always dismissed as indulgent. His therapist, Dr. Thompson, did not coddle him. "Why did you push Elena away?" she asked during their third session. "I was scared," Alexander admitted, staring at his hands. "Of what?" "Of becoming my father. He was cruel, controlling, and loveless. I watched him destroy my mother with indifference. I swore I would never be like him. So when Elena told me she was pregnant, all I could see was my father's face, his failures, his cruelty. I panicked." "So you became exactly what you feared," Dr. Thompson said. The words hit like a physical blow. "Yes." Dr. Thompson leaned forward. "Tell me about your mother. What happened to her?" Alexander's throat tightened. "She died when I was 16. Cancer. My father never visited her in the hospital. Said weakness disgusted him. She died asking for him, and he was at a bar. And you think loving Elena would make you like him. I guess needing anyone makes you vulnerable. And vulnerability means pain. It also implies connection, joy, love, and everything that makes life worth living." Dr. Thompson's voice softened. "You rejected Elena because you were afraid of becoming cruel. But rejection is the most brutal act. You became your father by trying not to." Alexander sat with that truth, feeling it settle into his bones. "What are you going to do about that?" "I do not know. She will not talk to me, will not let me near the children. I have tried apologizing." "Apologizing is not an action," Dr. Thompson said. "It is words." "What actions are you taking to prove you have changed?" Alexander told her about his attempts, the gifts, and the emails, all of which were met with rejection. He admitted he did not know what else to do. "Keep showing up," Dr. Thompson said. "This is not for Elena's approval, nor to earn access to your daughters. Do it because it is making you into someone who deserves those things." He took her advice to heart. Alexander found a community center that provided meals and childcare for single parents. He signed up for volunteer shifts, not high-profile charity galas where he could write checks and make speeches, but real, unglamorous work. Kitchen help, setup assistance, basic labor. His first shift was grueling, washing dishes for 100 families, steam burning his hands, his back aching from hours of standing. He returned the next week and the week after, falling into a rhythm with other volunteers who shared their own stories of survival. One, a single mother named Sophia worked 3 jobs while studying nursing, relying on the Center for Childcare. "You are new here," she said one evening, noticing his blistered hands. "What brings you?" "Trying to be better," Alexander said. "Better is action," Sophia replied. "Not words. Keep showing up." Elena, meanwhile, faced her own battles. She considered legal action, Knowing Alexander's abrupt termination could be grounds for a discrimination lawsuit, especially as a Latina woman facing systemic biases. But she hesitated, prioritizing her daughter's stability over courtroom fights. Instead, she poured energy into teaching Sofia, Mia, and Isabella about their heritage, celebrating cultural festivals like Dia de los Muertos at the shelter, and weaving stories of resilience into their bedtime routines. The girls were too young to understand, but Elena wanted their identities rooted in strength and pride. Now at 50,000 followers, her blog has grown into a platform for marginalized voices. She posted about navigating aid systems that often dismissed women of color, sharing resources and exposing inequities. Companies offered sponsorships, but Elena vetted them carefully, accepting only ethical brands aligned with her values. Her consulting business, Resilient Chains, took shape, with initial clients praising her expertise. Each milestone defied Alexander's dismissal, proof she could thrive without him. But late at night, when the girls slept and the shelter quieted, Elena allowed herself moments of doubt. Would her daughters feel his absence? Would they question why their father had rejected them? She pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the present. Sofia's shy smiles, Mia's boundless energy, Isabella's curious questions. They were enough. They had to be. Alexander kept volunteering, his hands growing calloused, his perspective shifting. He listened to stories of single parents, many facing the same systemic barriers Elena had overcome. He began to see the world beyond his penthouse, where survival was a daily act of courage. He hoped, faintly, that word of his consistency might reach Elena, that she might see he was trying to change. But hope was not enough. Hope required action, and action meant showing up, day after day, even when redemption seemed impossible. Alexander's resolve hardened, but his efforts met relentless rejection. He tried again, at the community center where Elena's consulting business, Resilient Chains, held its first-year launch event. The gathering was modest, hosted in a local community hall, filled with supporters, clients, and single parents who had followed her journey. Alexander arrived in casual clothes, a plain sweater and jeans, forsaking his usual tailored suits to blend into the crowd. He stood at the back, hoping to observe unnoticed, wanting to witness Elena's triumph over the ashes he had left her in. She was mid-speech, her voice steady and commanding, speaking about resilience and community. She said success is not about never falling, her eyes scanning the room. It is about who stays when you do. Some people leave when things get complicated. Those people do not earn the right to return when your life looks easier. They forfeited that right by choosing comfort over commitment. Her gaze landed on Alexander, and she froze mid-sentence. The room felt the shift, heads turning to follow her stare. The tension was palpable, a silent confrontation between a woman who had rebuilt her life and the man who had tried to destroy it. The crowd murmured, some recognizing him from the viral scandal. Security approached politely. "Sir, I am going to have to ask you to leave." "I understand," Alexander said quietly, leaving without argument, the sound of celebration fading behind him. He sat in his car in the parking lot, watching through the windows as Elena resumed her speech, smiling with genuine warmth among people who had supported her. She looked happy, the kind of happiness money could not buy and power could not command. She had built a life without him, a good life. The thought should have brought relief. Instead, it brought something worse, irrelevance. Alexander drove home, but instead of his penthouse, he parked outside the park where he had first seen Elena with the girls. He sat on the same bench, watching other families play, fathers pushing children on swings, mothers chasing toddlers, couples sharing the load of parenting. He had given that up, not just given it up, but actively rejected it, scorned it, called it a trap. A man sat beside him, bouncing a baby girl on his knee. "Beautiful day," the man chirped. "Yeah," Alexander replied. "Your kid here somewhere?" Alexander scanned the playground, knowing his daughters would not be there. "No, I do not get to see them." "Rough custody situation?" the man asked, nodding sympathetically. "My brother went through that. Missed so much of his son's life. He regrets it every day." "How does he live with that?" "By showing up anyway, even when his ex makes it hard, even when his son does not remember him. He shows up, proves he has changed, proves he is reliable." It has been almost 2 years of consistency. Now his son asks for him and wants to spend time with him. It is not perfect, but it is healing. Alexander watched the man's daughter giggle and reach for her father's face. What if you do not deserve that healing? Probably nobody does, but kids deserve fathers who try. That is what matters. The man stood gently tossing his daughter in the air, catching her while she shrieked joyfully. They walked toward the playground, leaving Alexander alone on the bench. Try actually changing, Elena had said. Not buying things, being better. Alexander pulled out his phone and searched for volunteer opportunities. Not high-profile charity galas where he could make headlines, but real, physical work. He found a community center serving single parents who needed kitchen help and setup assistance. He signed up for the next shift. When he arrived, the coordinator, a no-nonsense woman named Carla, barely looked up from her clipboard. Name? Alexander Harrington. Her head snapped up, recognition flickering, then replaced by neutrality. You will be in the kitchen, washing dishes, and helping with prep. Sound good? Perfect. We are short-staffed today, so you will have to work hard. This is not a photo op. I understand. The work was grueling. Mountains of dishes from feeding 100 struggling families. Steam from industrial sinks burning his hands. His back aching from hours of standing. Alexander's hands, accustomed to signing contracts, blistered within the first hour. He kept washing. Around him, volunteers chatted about their lives and struggles. He listened, realizing how insulated his world had been. These were survival stories. People juggling multiple jobs, childcare, systemic barriers. One volunteer, a young man named Javier, noticed Alexander struggling with the industrial faucet. Here, turn it like this. Take some getting used to. Thanks, Alexander said, watching Javier work with ease. How long have you been volunteering? Since I got out. Did some time, came back, could not find work. This place gave me purpose when nobody else would. Alexander nodded, humbled. He had judged people like Javier, reduced them to their mistakes, never considering what redemption required. A woman beside him glanced over. First time volunteering? That obvious? Your hands are not used to this work. She showed her own hands, scarred and strong. I am Sophia. Been coming here for 3 years. Alexander, I know who you are. Her voice held no judgment, just fact. Saw the news coverage. Alexander tensed. I deserved it all. Maybe, but you are here now. That is something. They worked in companionable silence, falling into a rhythm. Sophia shared her story. Single mother of twins, working 3 jobs, studying nursing, relying on the center for childcare. Must be hard, Alexander said. Life's hard for most people. Rich folks do not usually see it. She handed him another stack of dishes. What brought you here? Trying to figure out how to be better. Better is action, not a thought. Better is showing up, doing the work, not expecting applause. Alexander nodded, understanding she was testing him, seeing if he would quit when the work got tedious. He did not leave. He washed dishes for 4 hours, helped set tables, and mopped floors. By the end of his shift, his back ached and his hands were raw. Same time next week? Carla asked. I will be here. He returned the next week, the week after, and the one after that. No press, no fanfare, just Alexander Harrington washing dishes, setting up chairs, carrying boxes, while exhausted single parents brought their children for free meals and safe spaces. He began to understand the weight of their daily struggles, the courage it took to keep going. Elena, meanwhile, strengthened her community ties. She organized a cultural event at the shelter, celebrating Hispanic heritage with music and stories, teaching Sophia, Mia, and Isabella about their roots. The girls clapped to the rhythms, too young to grasp the significance, but absorbing their mother's pride. Her blog grew to 70,000 followers, a platform for exposing inequities in aid systems and sharing resources for marginalized women. She vetted new sponsorships carefully, ensuring they aligned with her values, and her consulting business landed its first major client, a small retailer needing supply chain optimization. Alexander kept volunteering, his presence becoming familiar at the center. He listened to Sophia's stories of raising twins alone, of navigating a world that often dismissed women like her. He began to see Elena's strength reflected in others, her resilience a beacon for those society overlooked. He hoped his consistency might reach her ears, that she might see he was trying to be the man she had once believed in. But he knew hope was not enough. He had to keep showing up, proving through actions that he was no longer the man who had abandoned her and their daughters. Alexander arrived at the Riverside Convention Center as evening settled, wearing a modest suit, carrying no expectations. The ballroom glowed warm against the December cold, with chandeliers casting soft light over decorated tables. 800 people mingled. The atmosphere was a genuine celebration rather than obligatory charity. He found his seat at table 43 in the back corner near the kitchen entrance. His tablemates introduced themselves. A teacher, a small business owner, a nurse, a retired firefighter. Regular people donated modest amounts and believed in the cause. They chatted about the organization's work, families helped, and Elena Ramirez's remarkable advocacy. "Have you heard her speak?" the teacher asked Alexander. "She is incredible, so honest about the struggle. It makes you want to do more and be better." Alexander nodded, unable to find words. The nurse beside him noticed his discomfort. "You okay? You look nervous." "Just grateful to be here," Alexander managed. The lights dimmed, music swelled. A video showed families helped by the fund, single mothers finishing education, fathers finding stable employment, and children accessing programs that changed trajectories. The stories were powerful, real, filled with messy truth rather than sanitized inspiration. Alexander recognized some of the families from the community center where he volunteered. Seeing their journeys documented this way, understanding how interconnected these support systems were, made him realize how little he had understood about the world most people lived in. Then Elena appeared on stage. Alexander's breath caught. She wore a deep emerald dress that made her skin glow, her curly hair styled elegantly, and confidence radiated from her posture. She was not the exhausted woman from the park or the struggling blogger from years ago. She was assertive and self-assured, someone who had survived fire and emerged forged in strength. "Thank you all for coming," Elena began, her voice carrying easily through the ballroom. "We are here tonight to celebrate something beautiful. Community. Not charity. Community. The difference matters. Charity says, 'I am helping you because you are beneath me.' The community says, 'I am helping you because we are doing this together.'" The crowd applauded. Elena smiled, looking genuinely moved. "Most of you know my story. A single mother of triplets started with nothing, built something sustainable through sheer stubbornness and the support of people who refused to let me fail." She paused, emotion flickering across her face. "But tonight is not about my story. It is about the hundreds of families whose stories are still being written, who need community rather than judgment, who deserve support without shame." She introduced families helped by the fund. A father who had lost his job and found new purpose through job training programs. A mother who had escaped abuse and rebuilt her life through subsidized housing and childcare. A teenager who had graduated high school despite homelessness, now attending college on scholarship. Each story shattered Alexander further. He watched these people thank Elena for believing in them, creating systems that helped rather than humiliated, and understanding the struggle because she had lived it. The teacher beside Alexander leaned over and whispered, "She is the reason I started donating. Reading her blog changed how I see my students' struggles. She is remarkable," Alexander said, his voice thick. "She is. Makes you wonder about the father, though. What kind of person abandoned someone like her?" Alexander felt his face flush. The nurse shot the teacher a sharp look, clearly recognizing who Alexander was, shaking her head slightly. The teacher's eyes widened in realization. "I am sorry, do not apologize," Alexander said quietly. "You are right to wonder. The answer is someone who was broken and chose to break others rather than fix himself." Awkward silence settled over their table. Alexander kept his eyes on Elena, watching her introduce the next family, her compassion evident in every word. In the front row, 3 little girls sat with a woman Alexander did not recognize. Sophia, Mia, and Isabella, wearing matching red dresses, could barely sit still. Almost 3 years old now, beautiful and alive, and growing up without knowing their father existed. Alexander's heart physically ached watching them. Sophia whispered to Mia, who giggled. Isabella waved at someone across the room. They were real, complete little humans with personalities and preferences and inner lives, not abstract concepts, not problems to solve. His daughters. Elena finished introducing the families and paused, looking at her notes. I have one more thing to say before we hear from our keynote speaker. Something personal. The room quieted. Alexander leaned forward instinctively. When I started this journey, I was angry. Angry at circumstances, at betrayal, at how hard everything was. That anger felt justified, and maybe it was. But anger is exhausting. It takes energy I needed elsewhere. So I made a choice. I would focus on building rather than burning, on creating rather than destroying, on teaching my daughters that strength is not about never falling. It is about getting up, brushing off, and moving forward anyway. She looked directly at her daughters, her expression softening. Sophia, Mia, and Isabella. If you watch this someday when you are older, I want you to know you were wanted, so desperately wanted by me. I built everything so you would have a life where love was abundant and shame was absent. You are my 3 reasons, always. The ballroom erupted in applause. People wiped tears. Alexander's vision blurred. He watched his daughters clap along with everyone else, not understanding yet that their mother's words were about them, for them. A promise she had kept every single day. Then Elena's eyes swept the room and landed on him. She froze mid-gesture. The smile dropped from her face. The entire atmosphere shifted as the audience sensed the tension, heads turning to follow her gaze to where Alexander sat in the back corner. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. The applause died. 800 people watched this silent exchange between a woman who had survived and the man who had tried to destroy her. Alexander stood before conscious thought. Before he could stop himself, his chair scraped loudly in the silence. The retired firefighter at his table grabbed his arm. "Think carefully about what you are doing, son," the man said quietly. "I have," Alexander replied. "For months now, this is the only thing I am certain of." He walked forward, each step feeling impossible, his heart hammering so loud he could barely hear his thoughts. Security moved to intercept, but Elena raised one hand, stopping them. The ballroom went completely silent. Conversation died like dominoes falling. Every eye was fixed on Alexander as he climbed the stage stairs. He took the microphone from Elena's motionless hands, faced 800 people and cameras rolling for the live stream, reaching thousands more. His hands shook so badly he almost dropped the microphone. "My name is Alexander Harrington," he began, his voice cracking. "Most of you know my face from headlines that called me heartless. They were right. I denied a woman who told me she was carrying my child. I told her to handle it alone. I accused her of manipulation when she was honest. I destroyed her career when she was vulnerable. I was a coward in expensive suits, calling it strength." This crowd collectively inhaled. Alexander's hands trembled violently. He looked at Sophia, Mia, and Isabella in the front row, 3 beautiful girls in red dresses, watching with wide, confused eyes. "Those 3 girls are mine. I denied them. I denied my mother when she needed me most. And now I stand here not to ask for forgiveness, but to admit I was wrong. To say what I should have said years ago. I am sorry." His voice broke, tears streaming down his face. "I am so profoundly sorry. Not because the world knows what I did, because I finally understand what I did." He collapsed to his knees, sobbing in front of hundreds, in front of cameras, in front of the woman he had destroyed and the daughters he had abandoned. The ballroom was silent, except for his broken breathing and scattered crying from audience members moved by the raw confession. Elena stood motionless, tears glistening in her eyes, her expression unreadable, a mixture of pain, anger, and something softer, perhaps the faintest trace of hope. The silence in the ballroom was deafening, broken only by Alexander's choked sobs as he knelt on the stage, the microphone trembling in his hands. 800 pairs of eyes bore into him, cameras capturing every tear, every shudder of his broken composure. Elena stood 3 feet away, her face wet with tears, her expression a complex tapestry of pain, anger, and guarded hope. The crowd held its breath, awaiting her response to his confession. A woman in the middle of the ballroom stood, her voice shaking but clear. "Thank you for telling the truth," she called out. "My father never did. My children deserved to hear this." Others began standing, not in ovation but in solidarity with Elena, with abandoned children everywhere, with the courage it took to speak truth publicly. Alexander was fully crying now, no longer trying to hide it. He looked at Elena, then at Sophia, Mia, and Isabella in the front row, their small faces confused but curious in their matching red dresses. "Elena Johnson is the strongest person I have ever known," he said, his voice ragged. "She did not need my money, she needed a partner, a father for our children. I failed so completely that I cannot repair it. I can only stand here and say what I should have said when she was brave enough to tell me the truth. I am sorry. I am so profoundly sorry. Not because the world knows what I did, because I finally understand what I did." His knees buckled further, and he collapsed fully, sobbing openly in front of the crowd, the cameras, the woman he had betrayed, and the daughters he had denied. The ballroom remained silent, the weight of his confession settling over the room like a heavy fog. Then Elena moved. She approached slowly, her emerald dress catching the light, her face glistening with tears. She stopped before him as he knelt on the stage floor, looking small and shattered. "Now you know what real strength looks like," she whispered, but the microphone caught it. "It is not the money, not the power. It is showing up every single day for people who need you. It is choosing them over comfort, over ego, over fear." Alexander looked up at her, unable to speak through his crying. Elena looked toward Sophia, Mia, and Isabella, then back at him. She said, "They deserve to know their father," her voice steady but soft. "Not because you have earned it, not because I have forgiven everything, but because they did not choose your mistakes. They are innocent in this." She extended one hand down to him. "You get one chance, not for me, for them. If you run again, prove unreliable, and hurt them like you hurt me, there will not be another opportunity. Do you understand?" "I will not run," Alexander choked out, taking her hand. "I swear I will not. I will spend the rest of my life proving I have changed." Elena helped him stand, her grip firm, but not warm. The audience remained silent, riveted, as she led him off the stage toward the front row, where Sophia, Mia, and Isabella sat with their babysitter, watching the crying man their mother was bringing toward them. Elena knelt beside her daughters, her voice gentle but deliberate. "Sophia, Mia, Isabella, this is Alexander. He made some huge mistakes, but he wants to try to get to know you, if that is okay with you." 3 pairs of identical eyes studied Alexander. The boldest, Isabella, tilted her head, her curious nature shining through. "Why are you crying?" Alexander knelt before his daughters, his face wet with tears, his heart breaking and healing simultaneously. "I am sad I missed so much time with you, and am thrilled to meet you now." Sophia, always cautious, looked at her mother. Elena nodded once, giving permission. The little girl reached out and patted Alexander's hand with tiny fingers. "It is okay. We can share our toys with you." Alexander broke down completely, no longer the powerful CEO or calculating billionaire. Still, a father holding his daughter's hand for the first time, understanding precisely what he had almost lost forever. Mia touched his other hand shyly, her vibrant energy tempered by uncertainty. Isabella leaned forward and wiped his tears clumsily with her small palm. "Do not be sad," Isabella said seriously. "Mama says tears are okay, but we must be brave too." "Your mama is very wise," Alexander managed, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you going to be our daddy now?" Mia asked, her voice soft and uncertain. Alexander looked at Elena, who remained standing, her expression guarded but softening at the edges. "I hope so," he said to Mia. "If your mama says it is okay, and if you want me to be, but I have to earn that. Do you know what earn means? For example, when we help mama, does she give us cookies?" Sophia asked, her timid voice barely audible. Sort of, except this is harder than helping with dishes. This means showing up every single day and proving I am someone you can trust. Elena stood watching this first fragile connection, her expression complex. Pain from past betrayals, hope for her daughter's sake, caution born of experience, and a faint trace of exhausted relief that maybe, just maybe, her daughter would know their father. The audience watched in suspended silence as Alexander met his daughters, as years of cruelty and abandonment gave way to tentative forgiveness. As a family that should never have been broken, began the impossible work of becoming whole. Cameras captured it all. Alexander Harrington on his knees before the triplets he had denied. Elena Ramirez standing guard with eyes that held no love, not anymore, but something more powerful. The absolute certainty that forgiveness, like abandonment, must be earned one single day at a time. In the back of the ballroom, 800 people who had come to celebrate community witnessed something even more profound instead. The beginning of redemption, messy and uncertain and achingly real. Proof that even the worst mistakes could transform into something like grace if someone were brave enough to face the truth they had been running from all along. Alexander rose, still holding Sophia's hand. Mia's fingers brushing his. Isabella's curious gaze locked on him. He looked at Elena, who gave a slight nod, a signal to proceed cautiously. "Thank you," he whispered, too low for the microphone to catch, but Elena heard it. She did not respond, but her eyes softened, just a fraction, acknowledging the weight of the moment. The babysitter stood guiding the girls back to their seats, and the crowd began to murmur, some clapping softly, others wiping tears. The keynote speaker took the stage, but the energy in the room had shifted. Alexander returned to his seat at table 43, his tablemates looking at him with awe and unease. "You did the right thing," the retired firefighter said quietly. "Takes guts to own up like that." Alexander nodded, unable to speak, his mind replaying the touch of his daughter's hands, the sound of their voices, the weight of Elena's words. One chance. Not for me, for them. He knew this was not forgiveness. Not yet. It was an opening, a crack in the door he had slammed shut years ago. He would have to show up, day after day, not just for Sophia, Mia, and Isabella, but for the man he was trying to become. The gala continued, speeches and awards filling the air, but Alexander sat quietly, his world reduced to the memory of 3 small hands and his promise to earn their trust. Elena, on stage, resumed her role, her strength undimmed, her focus on the community she had built. But as she spoke, her eyes flickered to her daughters, then to Alexander, a silent reminder that this was only the beginning. The gala's aftermath rippled through Elena's life like a stone dropped in still water. Alexander's public confession had shifted the narrative, turning her private struggle into a public spectacle of redemption. She returned to her small apartment, Sophia, Mia, and Isabella asleep in their triple stroller, their tiny faces peaceful despite the night's upheaval. Elena sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through messages on her blog Triple Horizons. Comments poured in, some praising her strength, others demanding Alexander face legal consequences. She felt no triumph, only exhaustion. This was not the closure she had imagined. It was a new chapter, fraught with uncertainty. Elena consulted a lawyer the next week, a pro bono advocate named Carla, who specialized in family law for marginalized women. "You have a case," Carla said, reviewing Elena's termination records. "Firing a pregnant employee without cause, especially after an intimate relationship with the CEO, screams discrimination. Add your Latina background, and it is a textbook case of systemic bias." But Elena hesitated. A lawsuit against Alexander Harrington would be a media circus, dragging Sophia, Mia, and Isabella into the spotlight. She wanted stability for her daughters, not courtrooms. Still, Carla pushed for a mediated settlement, at a minimum child support to secure their future. "He owes them that much," Carla said, "and you deserve it for what he put you through." Elena agreed to mediation, not for herself, but for her girls. The process was clinical and held in a neutral office with lawyers on both sides. Alexander attended, his face haggard, his usual polished demeanor replaced by quiet resolve. Paternity tests confirmed what Elena already knew. Sofia, Mia, and Isabella were his daughters. The court mandated child support, a substantial sum that eased Elena's financial strain, but felt like a hollow victory. Alexander offered more, proposing a trust fund for the girls' education. Elena accepted, but only after ensuring the funds were locked until the girls were 18, untouchable by either parent. "I am not here for your money," she told him during mediation. "I am here so my daughters have what they need to thrive." Alexander nodded, his eyes meeting hers briefly. "I understand. I want to be more than a check. I want to be their father." "That is not my decision," Elena replied. "It is theirs when they are old enough to understand. For now, you prove yourself through actions, not promises." The mediator outlined a visitation plan, supervised meetings 1 hour a week, at a community center where Elena felt safe. Alexander agreed without protest, his compliance a stark contrast to the man who had once dismissed her pregnancy as a trap. The first visit was awkward. Elena sat in the center of the playroom's corner, watching Alexander kneeling on the floor with Sofia, Mia, and Isabella. The girls, nearly 3, approached him cautiously. Sofia clung to a stuffed bunny, her shy nature making her hesitant. Mia, bold and energetic, handed him a block and demanded he build a tower. Isabella, ever curious, asked why he had a shiny watch. Alexander answered softly, building the tower, explaining that the watch was a gift from his mother. Elena watched, her heart a tangle of hope and fear. She wanted her daughters to know their father, but every interaction felt like a risk, a reminder of his betrayal. Alexander began attending therapy with Dr. Thompson weekly, joined occasionally by Elena for co-parenting sessions. These meetings were tense, forcing Alexander to confront his biases, including the privilege that had closed his eyes to Elena's struggles as a Latina single mother. Dr. Thompson pushed him to unpack his father's abandonment, how it had shaped his fear of vulnerability. Dr. Thompson said, "You hurt Elena because you saw her honesty as a threat. You need to understand the cultural and systemic barriers she faced to appreciate her strength." Alexander listened, taking notes, committing to change. Elena remained guarded, sharing only what was necessary for the girl's sake. Still, she noticed his effort, the way he asked about her cultural traditions, wanting to incorporate them into the girls' lives. He started small, showing up consistently for visits. He read bedtime stories in Spanish, haltingly at first, practicing phrases to honor Elena's heritage. Sofia warmed to his gentle voice. Mia giggled at his mispronunciations, and Isabella corrected him with precocious confidence. Elena allowed him to attend a cultural festival, where the girls danced to mariachi music, their red dresses twirling. Alexander clapped, his eyes bright with pride, and Elena felt a flicker of something she could not name, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement of his persistence. Challenges arose. Alexander missed a preschool recital due to a board meeting, and Elena's trust wavered. She confronted him at the next visit. "You promised consistency. One mistake, and I wonder if you will disappear again." Alexander apologized, his voice raw. "I messed up. It will not happen again." "I am learning, Elena. I am trying." He rescheduled meetings, prioritizing the girls, and showed up to their next event, a finger-painting showcase with paint smudged on his suit by the end. Mia proudly presented him with a messy heart painting, and he hung it in his office, starkly contrasting the sterile decor. Elena's blog grew to 100,000 followers, a platform for advocating systemic change. She posted about the legal process, anonymizing Alexander but exposing single mothers' barriers in court. Her consulting business, Resilient Chains, landed a second major client, allowing her to move to a larger apartment with a small backyard. The girls thrived, Sofia growing more confident, Mia channeling her energy into dance, and Isabella asking endless questions about the world. Elena taught them about their Latina roots, weaving stories of their great-grandmother into nightly rituals, ensuring they grew up proud of their identity. Alexander integrated into their routines, but missteps persisted. He once brought expensive toys, forgetting Elena's rejection of material gestures. Sofia ignored the toys, preferring her old bunny, and Elena reminded him, "They need your time, not your wallet." He adjusted, bringing books instead, reading to them about Hispanic heroes like Frida Kahlo. The girls began calling him Papa, a fragile term earned through weeks of showing up. Elena watched, her heart softening but never fully opening. She could not forget the man who had accused her of manipulation, who had left her homeless and pregnant. The media scrutiny lingered, with tabloids speculating about Alexander's redemption arc. Elena ignored the noise, focusing on her daughters and her work. Alexander faced his battles, and his company stabilized, but his reputation was forever altered. He stepped back from high-profile events, delegating to focus on therapy and volunteering. At the community center, he worked alongside Sophia, who noticed his growth. "You are not the same guy from the news," she said one evening, scrubbing dishes beside him. "Keep going." Alexander nodded, grateful for the acknowledgement, knowing it was only a fraction of what he owed Elena and their daughters. By the end of the first year post-gala, the girls recognized Alexander as a constant presence. Sophia hugged him before leaving visits, Mia demanded he push her swing, and Isabella quizzed him about his childhood. Elena allowed supervised outings to the park, watching closely, her trust growing in increments. Alexander knew this was not complete forgiveness, but a chance to prove himself. He vowed to keep showing up, not just for Sophia, Mia, and Isabella, but for the man he was becoming. One who valued connection over control. Watching her daughters laugh with their father, Elena felt the weight of her anger lighten, not gone, but no longer consuming. For the first time, she believed they might build something new, not a return to what was, but a fragile, hopeful path forward rooted in the love she had always given her girls. 5 years had passed since the gala, where Alexander Harrington bared his soul. The city had changed, its skyline reshaped by new towers, but the transformation in Elena Ramirez's life was far more profound. Her small apartment had become a home, its backyard filled with laughter from Sophia, Mia, and Isabella, now 8 years old, their personalities as distinct as their names. Sophia, the cautious dreamer, spent hours sketching vibrant murals inspired by their Latina heritage. Mia, the fiery whirlwind, led her dance team with boundless energy. The relentless questioner Isabella devoured books and challenged everyone with her sharp curiosity. Elena's consulting firm, Resilient Chains, had grown into a respected enterprise serving small businesses nationwide. Its mission is rooted in empowering marginalized communities. Her blog, Triple Horizons, had evolved into a nonprofit advocacy platform, with 500,000 followers and partnerships with local organizations to reform aid systems for single parents. Alexander had kept his promise, showing up consistently, though the path was not without stumbles. He attended every school event, from Sophia's art shows to Mia's dance recitals to Isabella's science fairs, and his presence was a quiet constant in their lives. He learned to braid their hair, incorporating beads that reflected their cultural pride, and told stories of their great-grandmother whose strength Elena had passed down. His penthouse, once a sterile monument to wealth, now held a corner filled with the girls' drawings and a shelf of books in Spanish. He had stepped back from his company's helm, delegating to focus on family and volunteering at the community center, where he still washed dishes alongside Sophia, now a nurse and close friend. The legal reckoning had settled years ago. Child support payments arrived like clockwork, funding college accounts for the girls, but Elena ensured their lives remained grounded. She taught them the value of resilience over reliance, weaving lessons of their heritage into daily life. Family nights included cooking traditional dishes like tamales, the girls giggling as they helped, flour dusting their faces. Alexander joined these evenings when invited, his contributions clumsy but earnest, earning Mia's teasing and Sophia's shy approval. Isabella, ever analytical, quizzed him about his past, forcing him to confront his father's abandonment with honesty. "I made mistakes like my dad did," he told her once, "but I am here now, trying to be better." Isabella nodded, her young mind processing. "Okay, Papa, keep trying." Elena's trust in Alexander grew slowly, built on actions, not words. He had faltered early on, missing a parent-teacher conference due to a crisis at work, and Elena had been fierce. She told him he did not get to pick and choose when to show up. "The girls deserve all of you," every time. Alexander apologized, rearranged his priorities, and never missed another event. Therapy with Dr. Thompson continued individually and jointly, helping them navigate co-parenting and cultural differences. Alexander learned to respect Elena's boundaries, understanding her strength as a single mother who had faced systemic biases as a Latina woman. He educated himself on those barriers, advocating within his company for equitable policies, a quiet atonement for his past ignorance. The media had moved on to new scandals, but the public's memory lingered. Alexander's reputation as the reformed billionaire persisted, though he shunned the spotlight, declining interviews to focus on his daughters. Elena, however, embraced her platform, speaking at national conferences about single parenthood and systemic reform. Her speeches were raw, referencing her journey without naming Alexander, emphasizing community over charity. Her advocacy led to policy changes, like streamlined housing aid for single mothers. Earning her awards, she accepted humbly, always crediting her daughters as her inspiration. Their family was unconventional but strong. Elena and Alexander were not a couple. Their romantic past was too scarred to revive, but they were partners in raising Sophia, Mia, and Isabella. The girls called him Papa freely now, their trust earned through years of presence. Sophia painted him a family portrait, including all 4 of them, which hung in their homes. Mia choreographed a dance for his birthday, her energy infectious. Isabella wrote him a letter, listing 10 reasons he was a good dad, her logic meticulous yet heartfelt. One spring evening, during a vibrant Dia de los Muertos festival, Alexander watched the girls perform a traditional dance, their dresses bright with marigold patterns. Elena stood beside him, her face glowing with pride. The festival was a community event she had organized, blending cultural celebration with fundraising for her nonprofit. As the music swelled and the girls twirled, Alexander turned to her, his expression serious. "Elena, I have been thinking. You have given me more than I deserve, a chance to know our daughters and be part of their lives. I want to be more than their father. I want to be your partner, not just in parenting, but in life. Will you marry me?" Elena paused, her eyes searching his. The crowd around them faded, the music a distant hum. "I do not need you to complete me, Alexander. I built this life without you, but you have shown up every day for years. You have changed, not for me, but for them and yourself. That means something." She took his hand, her grip steady. "Yes, but this is not a fairy tale. It is a promise to keep showing up, together." With tears in his eyes, Alexander nodded and slipped a simple ring onto her finger, engraved with 3 stars for Sophia, Mia, and Isabella. The girls ran to them, sensing the moment. "Did Papa ask you something special?" Isabella asked, her eyes wide. "He did," Elena said, smiling. "And I said yes, because we are a family, and families grow stronger." Mia cheered, Sophia hugged them both, and Isabella demanded to see the ring, analyzing it with her usual scrutiny. The crowd applauded, not for a billionaire or a blogger, but for a family forged through resilience and redemption. Years later, as teenagers, Sophia, Mia, and Isabella knew their story, not from tabloids, but their mother's honest words. Elena told them of her struggles, triumphs, and Alexander's journey from abandonment to atonement. They grew up proud of their Latina roots, their mother's strength, and their father's transformation. At a community center event, now a tradition, Elena and Alexander stood side by side, watching their daughters lead a workshop for younger children. Resilient Chains had expanded, mentoring small businesses owned by women of color, while Triple Horizons funded scholarships for single parents' children. The city lights twinkled beyond the center's windows, a reminder of the nights Elena had faced alone, now a backdrop to a life rebuilt. Alexander took her hand, their rings glinting, and whispered, "Thank you for giving me a chance to be more than my mistakes." Elena squeezed his hand. "We built this together, for them." Sophia, Mia, and Isabella laughed with the children, their voices echoing with joy, resilience, and love. Their legacy was not wealth or fame, but a family that had survived betrayal, systemic barriers, and time, emerging stronger, bound by a love that refused to break. The festival continued, music and laughter filling the air, a testament to an enduring legacy that began with a mother's defiance and a father's redemption, carried forward by three girls who embodied the best of both.